Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Welcome to the second episode of the Big Conversation podcast, powered by Dubai Airport Free Zone. Myself, Esma Ghaith, I will be your host for today's episode. And I'm super excited to have with me here in the studio Mr. Gurgesh. Gurgesh is a senior manager with PwC corporate tax team. And he is a chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. And he brings with him a total of 10 years of experience in the tax areas and international tax advisory. So we're super excited to have you here with us, Gurgesh.
Thank you, Asma. The pleasure is mine.
Thank you. Right. So I think I gave away a little bit of what will the topic of today's topic will be. We will be discussing about corporate tax. So we do understand that corporate tax is one of the hottest topic right now that's being discussed in many business platforms. So whether you are an existing business owner or you are a potential investor looking into Dubai or the UAE in general to set up your business, or as simple as an entrepreneur, I think corporate tax is a topic of interest. Now, for me personally, it is also something that I'm really passionate about, being a certified management accountant. So I'm really keen and eager to understand further how has the law impacted the companies here in the UAE and most importantly, free zone. So let's start with the first obvious question, which is, what was the impact of the tax announcement on companies here within the UAE?
Absolutely, Asma. I think you've touched upon some big points already. It's applicable for everyone. It's applicable for every business that is operating in the UAE. So maybe just to take a step back, the UAE introduced corporate tax law. It was issued in December 2022, and it's applicable for all businesses that operate in the UAE and is effective from financial year starting after 1st June 2023. So what that means is, if you have a business that has a January to December financial year, then your first tax year starts from 1st January 2024, right? And you will need to register yourself, you will need to file tax returns. So that's a compliance obligation which every business in the country needs to be aware of.
Yeah. So we're already live in a corporate tax environment right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And talking about the tax rate, it's 9%. That's the standard mainstream rate. But as you said, in case of free zones, free zone companies and branches that meet certain conditions are eligible for the 0% corporate tax regime.
Right. So you mentioned that the businesses here in the UAE, everybody basically needs to register. And now you touched upon free zones in particular, because we do understand free zones enjoy special, let's say, incentives when it comes to corporate tax. And it's zero rated if you meet certain condition. So can you tell us a little bit more about what was the first reaction of, let's say, free zone companies when this tax law came out? Because we do understand that free zones, they have always been enjoying certain benefits of, let's say, 100% foreign ownership and then tax exemption. But now we've seen VAT being introduced and now corporate tax. So what was the reaction of the market?
When the law came out, it was clear that free zones, not all free zone entities would be eligible for the 0% corporate tax. There had to be conditions which need to be met. Now, it's absolutely worthwhile looking at some of these conditions, the key conditions. First and foremost, you need to be incorporated, set up, or registered in a free zone. So you can either be a free zone company or a free zone branch. Mm-hmm. And when I say free zone branch, it can be a foreign company with a branch in the free zone, or even a UAE mainland company with a branch in the free zone, right? So that's condition number one. Mm-hmm. Second, you should earn qualifying income. Now, what do you mean by qualifying income? We can look at it into 3 or 4 buckets. And this may be a bit technical, but I'll try to simplify as much as I can. So if you have a free zone entity or a branch which transacts with another free zone entity or a branch, with another free zone person, right? And you earn income from it. Such income would be regarded as qualifying income unless, and there is a big unless here, unless it is in relation to an excluded activity. So there is a whole list of excluded activity which has been mentioned. So for example, banking activities, transactions with natural persons, subject to certain exceptions, insurance activities, etc. So that's category 1. Again, a free zone person transacting with another free zone person, the income would be regarded as qualifying income unless it falls under one of the excluded activities. Number two, if a free zone person is transacting with any other person, so which can be a mainland company, which can be a client outside of the UAE, then the income would be regarded as qualifying income only if it is from activities which are known as qualifying activities. Again, there is a whole list of activities which are mentioned. To name a few, we have holding of shares and other securities, headquarters services, distribution activities, and we will touch upon this in a little bit more detail. So distribution activities only if it is carried out from a designated zone, right? There are fund management activities, wealth and investment management activities. So there are a whole list of activities which have been mentioned under the qualifying activity list. So if you carry on a qualifying activity, the income from that would also be regarded as qualifying income. And then there's something called qualifying intellectual property. So any income which you earn from qualifying intellectual property would also be regarded as qualifying income. And then, any ancillary activities to the qualifying activities would also be regarded as qualifying income. So there are a few nuances which one would need to be aware of when you are determining whether a particular income stream is qualifying income or not. So we had the a free zone guide, which is issued by the Federal Tax Authority just 2 weeks back. And it's a very informative guide. It provides a lot of illustrations, a lot of examples. It clearly tells us with respect to each qualifying activity, what are the various functions which could be regarded as qualifying, right? So I think around 1.5 years back, we have had clients reaching out to us saying, look, we operate in the free zone. We know we are subject to 0%. Should I even take the registration? So it's not as easy as that.
Yeah.
The first question is whether you meet all these conditions, and qualifying income condition is one of the key conditions, right? Third, very important, substance condition. So you need to meet adequate substance in the free zone or designated zone, as the case may be. Next one, transfer pricing. So if you have multiple group entities, there are transactions between group entities, be it within the UAE, outside of the UAE, you need to ensure that you're compliant from a transfer pricing perspective. That is, all your transactions are at arm's length, like how you would deal with a third party. And there are compliance requirements to be met from a transfer pricing standpoint. And you would also need to maintain standalone financial statements. So these are broadly the conditions which a free zone entity will need to meet in order to be eligible for the 0% corporate tax.
Right. So you touched upon a very important point of qualifying activities. Now, talking from a personal experience in Dubai Airport Free Zone, we have actually seen a noticeable shift in the different types of industries that are interested now in free zone spaces. And particularly, for example, distribution industry that you've mentioned, because of the special incentive in Dubai Airport Free Zone being a designated zone. So people who are working, let's say, in the distribution industry, and if they come and set up within a designated zone such as Dubai Airport Free Zone, they can enjoy certain benefits even if they transact with mainland partners. That's what we understand. And again, other than corporate tax law, because of the fact that Dubai Airport Free Zone is a designated zone, we've also seen certain advantages also on the VAT front. Because yes, VAT is not, let's say, a business tax. It's not, the burden is not really on the business, but still companies do care because there are certain, regulations and compliances that you need to fulfill. So if you are set up in a designated zone such as Dubai Airport Free Zone, you can enjoy these benefits. So we've seen actually a shift and change in the behavior of the investors here around the area.
No, I think that's a very important point, Asma, which you raised regarding designated zones and distribution activities. And ever since the ministerial decisions on free zones were issued, we have been receiving a lot of requests from global clients who want to set up their distribution hubs in the UAE, right? And for that, the key is absolutely you need to set it up in a designated zone. So that is a requirement. What's also important is, and this is one more point which I want to discuss regarding the conditions which a free zone entity would need to meet in order to be subject to the 0%. It's the de minimis threshold requirement. So I discussed about the qualifying income, how a free zone entity will need to earn qualifying income to be subject to the 0% corporate tax. it would also need to meet the de minimis requirement, which means the non-qualifying revenue. So that is anything other than qualifying income which you derive. The non-qualifying revenue should not exceed 5 million dirhams or 5% of the total revenues, whichever is lower during a year.
Okay, so that's the threshold that the FTA have set, that companies can still generate non-qualifying income, but without losing the status or the advantages of qualifying activity.
Exactly. So now this requires businesses to keep a track of, their different income streams, right? Because what happens is, if you do not meet this condition or any of the other free zone conditions which I mentioned in one particular year, you lose out on the 0% status during that year and the next 4 years. So it's very important.
Total of 5 years.
Total 5 years.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So people have to be very careful because if you lose that position, then you're losing it for the next additional 4 years.
Absolutely.
That's very interesting. Yeah. And now you also mentioned a very important point on businesses just need to, carry on doing their natural business, but at the top of that, they need to introduce, let's say, certain reporting. You mentioned maybe they need to segregate their income. And from a free zone perspective, just to give an example, because free zones that are set up as branch companies within the free zone, they didn't really need to submit financial statements. But now with the introduction of corporate tax, they need to maintain separate financial statements for their entities within the free zone, right? So these are some of the additional, I think, requirements that needs to be fulfilled or conditions that needs to be fulfilled by free zone companies in order for them, to be within the they're not really in the gray area, they're within the law, and they're 100% in compliance with the issued and prescribed laws, right?
Absolutely. And it's again not just for the free zone entities. So all UAE taxable persons will need to maintain financial statements.
Okay, yeah. That's very interesting. Normally people would react to any announcement of tax as if it's like another burden, but we do understand that there are certain broader economic advantages and implications of the introduction of any tax within, internationally or within the country UAE here itself. So can you tell us a little bit more about how the announcement of tax is actually seen positively on the economy here in the UAE and on businesses as in general?
The general response has been positive. End of the day, it's a 9% corporate tax. The rate is much lower than any other country in the region, barring Bahrain, which does not have corporate tax. 9% it's still a single digit, which you do not get in any other part of the Middle East. So, and right from the public consultation document stage, the government has always, signified its intention to keep the law very simple, right? If you look at the law, when it started, it was a 70-page law. Right? And the number of adjustments, adjustments you need to undertake in order to reach from your profit before tax in your financial statements to the taxable income, it's very minimal, right? So that way the government has managed to keep it very simple. And I still believe, compared to a lot of other jurisdictions, the law is very simple.
Yes.
I don't feel it's been a big burden on the businesses, but something which the businesses need to recognize and act upon as soon as possible. Yeah.
And I think it's worth mentioning here that, yes, you mentioned that the law is very much, let's say, it's easier than if you look at other international taxation laws, but at the same time, the Federal Taxation Authority and the Ministry of Finance, and again, experts such as yourself, PwC, and the Big Fours have been extending their help and their support. As you mentioned, there are a lot of clarifications getting issued, and all of this is with the aim to, simplify the law and try and make it as simple as possible for businesses, to adopt. And I think they've been running a lot of webinars, the FTA, along with the Ministry of Finance. There are a lot of webinars, even seminars, and they have different channels to, get in touch with them. And again, there are also experts such as yourself that companies can reach out to easily, to make sure that, they are within the law and they're complying 100%. What do you think businesses will continue to do to adopt to this changing, every day we have, let's say, as you mentioned, new clarifications getting issued. So what do they need to, do to get prepared for their first return that's coming up?
Absolutely. I think most of the businesses are already into their first tax year, and a lot of them have already done something called as impact assessments, either internally or through an external consultant, on understanding what's the impact of the law on their operations, on their structure, compliance requirements. The FTA and the Ministry of Finance have been great with organizing a lot of these event sessions and webinars, and even the guides. If you take, I mean, if you look at the Federal Tax Authority guides which are being issued, beautiful examples and illustrations have been provided. Right?
Many examples and illustrations, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So these are all beneficial to the taxpayers to understand, one, whether their interpretation is right, whether that's aligned with the FTA interpretation of things. So that way, so it's up to the businesses to keep track of all these changes, right? And of course, the tax return form would be issued, it has to be issued soon, right? So we would need to look at that as well, whether any changes to the systems are required. Even now, we have been helping a lot of clients in getting their systems aligned in order to generate the required data for the tax return compliances.
That's very important.
That's very important. Yeah. When you talk about any business decision today, tax should be in the back of your mind.
Yeah. So I'm sure that it might sound complicated, but once businesses actually start, investing the time, effort, some sort of resources, as you mentioned, system development if needed, then things will get, I think, more clear. And I remember this was the reaction when VAT was announced. Like businesses, some businesses went, no, we need to change everything, but that's not really the case. You go as just business as normal, and then you need to adapt, as you said, to the law and regulations. Now, from your perspective, what advice would you give businesses to navigate through these tax changes, specifically in free zones?
I'm just hoping that all of you have already taken steps to comply with corporate tax law. But if you haven't, I think this is the right time, absolutely the right time. You're not late. You've got a lot of resources available on the FTA portal, online. There are a lot of external consultants also available who can guide you in the right path. So take actions already. If you're in the free zone, as I mentioned, yes, you're eligible for the 0% corporate tax regime, but you need to meet all these conditions. So do this analysis as soon as possible on whether you meet these conditions. And as I mentioned earlier, if you fail to meet one of these conditions in a year, you lose out on the regime for 5 years. So it's very important that you track meeting these conditions on a year-on-year basis.
Yes, so I think what Gargesh is trying to tell us all is that let's start taking action if you haven't already. It's very important that we start reading through the law, understand it, and Dubai Airport Free Zone is here for you. In case you have any queries, we can definitely direct you through the right channel to obtain the professional advice. Corporate tax is not something that's very complicated. It might sound like it, but we can definitely, just like we did with the VAT, we can, business is going to continue as usual. And Dubai Airport Free Zone, being a designated zone, is going to continue as a major business hub. With the proximity to the airport, companies can enjoy many benefits on the corporate tax as well as the VAT front. So thank you very much, Gargesh. That was very insightful. I'm sure that many of our listeners have enjoyed and understood further on the corporate tax. And thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for more interesting topics to come on The Big Conversation.